money is just a tool. And if you don't know how to use it, having a bigger tool isn't going to help you. And it's, you think about an athlete or a celebrity or whoever, we're picking on them, but I think that's maybe a more extreme example, but it just goes to show that if you don't know how to handle the money you have, getting more of it is not going to make your situation better. And I think a lot of people think, well, I can build wealth when I'm making more money.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more months than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, part 2 of a show, I welcome Chad Hufford. Chad and I had a great conversation in episode 1, and it was just too fantastic to not continue on with the conversation. Good morning, Chad.
Hey, good morning, Dwight. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, brother. I was actually so excited for our conversation this morning. I am for a lot of my podcasts, but some of them are really, really close to my heart, right? They just really touch my soul. And we connected in a very short period of time. And we've only had one conversation prior to this. Obviously, outside of the recording, we've had some good conversations as well. So I just wanted to say and start off this episode to say how much I appreciate you. And I'm blessed that God brought you into my life.
I appreciate you saying that, and the pleasure has been mine. And I do believe that. I do believe that these things aren't accidental, and that God put us in touch with one another, and also He's given us the opportunity to encourage others around us. And hopefully, this conversation can continue to be an encouragement to your audience.
Yeah, I know it will. And for those that are listening or watching, bottom line, life doesn't have to be full of so many people. I talk to people, this is just as a side note before we get started on our budgeting conversation we were having. So many people in life will say to me, oh, I have so many friends, I have so many contacts, yet having abundance of friends or abundance of a network or contacts doesn't make a complete life. Sometimes narrowing it and having a smaller network of people that know, like, and trust you, and like, and trust them, and you have commonalities where you can talk about, for you and I, specifically my core values fall into line of faith, family, and work. Those are the type of people I'm looking for. So those listening, think about who in your life really makes you feel glad, really makes you feel hopeful. You can't wait to see them again. They walk out of the room, you can't wait for them to come back in. They call you, you can't wait for a second call. If you get my idea, bottom line, life is too short to worry about having numbers. It's having quality, right? Not quantity. And what do you think about that?
So it's so interesting you said that. So I think when it comes to friendships, when it comes to relationships, here's the way I think of it. 100 kittens do not equal a lion. And quantity will never make up for quantity. And there are going to be certain, when I say lions, your friends don't have to be big, seemingly powerful, aggressive people, but they are going to be people that offer you protection in one way or another. They protect your emotions. They may protect you physically. They protect you as a person. They give you courage. They make you brave. They offer camaraderie, right? They offer you encouragement. There's somebody that just does life with you. And you cannot make up for that type of person with just mere numbers. You've got to have the right people around you and really pour into those individuals.
Oh, absolutely. And, before we started recording, you were talking about family. And again, that's one of my core values. I only have three. I don't keep it. Obviously, there's offshoots of them, but faith, family, work. And you talked about the fact that you're going on a trip this weekend with your family, and the enjoyment and excitement in your face. And the reason I bring that up is, first and foremost, our closest parts of our family that we need to worry about. I hear people talk about, oh, I got to make sure I keep John or Sally happy or these friends happy. Yet I hear very little communication about family, yet not from you, which is great. I'm not saying you don't have friends, but first and foremost, your family are your friends too, right? They are your tribe. They are your closest network of people that will be there throughout your life if you do the things the right way, which you are, from what I can, tell, which is a good thing.
Well, I believe family is one of my biggest responsibilities. And it goes beyond just this generation, because I am so blessed to have close relationships with my own siblings. In fact, two of them work for me. One of those, my sister, who runs my office, she has for 7 or 8 years, is unbelievable at her job. One person mentioned nepotism one time, like, oh, it sounds like a little nepotism going on at Veritas. I said, I do not know anybody as capable and competent as my sister, so I hired her. Like, I don't know what you want me to do about that, but she just gave birth to her first son yesterday.
Oh,
So
congratulations to her, and
thank
to
you.
you as a new uncle.
New uncle, and a new part of the Veritas family. But just so I'm in my 40s now, and still for 40 years we've been each other's best friends. Now, some of that probably started out being homeschooled. You don't have a lot of choices when you're around your family all the time and not around a lot of other kids. Being homeschooled in the 80s was very different than it is now. But yeah, I mean, it's those relationships, not just with parents and kids, but the stronger the relationship with parents and kids, the stronger the relationship, I believe, even with kids. And then that goes down to the next generation. Now all of our kids, these cousins, all playing together, and it's awesome. It's beautiful. I love seeing that. And yes, we are going to go on a trip this week, but 2 weeks ago we were on a family trip. We rented a bunch of cabins, and myself and my siblings were down there with our spouses and all these cousins. It was a little bit crazy. There was like 15 kids running around everywhere, but it was awesome. Like those memories that you can't put a price on. And that's what I think, that's what life is about. It's not about things. It's not about material possessions. It's about those experiences, those memories. Like those are my favorite things to give my kids.
I agree. I got back on the 18th of August. I was gone from the 8th till 18th. I rented a cabin for my kids and grandkids to come, and didn't have that many kids running around, but still, there was like 12 of us with a bunch of kids on top of that. And it was fun. Was it crazy and hectic? Absolutely. Was it some great memories? Absolutely. Was there some character building moments? Absolutely.
Yes.
But there was more memories created than you can shake a stick at. And I look at my adult kids once in a while, still in the last couple of weeks, even a couple of days ago, posting pictures of us hanging out around the campfire, or them doing slip and slide on outside, or being on the beach. And just, life is in session. This isn't a dress rehearsal. And to bring up your comment about nepotism, I think it is, it's such a terrible word. Personally, it's such a way for people to be negative for something that they don't have. They don't have the ability, or maybe they're jealous because they wish they had somebody. Why wouldn't you want to help your family out? If they're capable, they deserve it. And I had that happen when I was growing up. People would say, oh, you're so lucky you're working for your dad, because I was a young lad, and my dad would get mad at people. They didn't use that term back then. Back in the 70s into the 80s, it wasn't used. They were just like, oh, it must be nice. And if my dad heard it, or even some of his staff, are you kidding? Dwight's a really hard worker. He's probably one of the hardest, and his dad's harder on him than he is on anybody here. So, that isn't nepotism. It's the fact that he knew I could do the job. He could count on me. right? He counted me more than anybody else. Not necessarily that people weren't great there, but you know what I mean? He was able
Yeah.
to count on me as his son, that I would work hard. And that's how I grew up. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I would love one of my kids to want to work with me. Like, so congratulations. That's awesome.
Well, and yeah, we do see it abused. You do see situations where kids are brought into maybe a business situation and they haven't been trained, they haven't been brought up, they haven't been equipped the way they should. And I think family relationships can be abused in business, but it doesn't
Of
sound like it
course.
happened with you. It
No.
certainly hasn't happened here. And to your point too, I'm not pressuring any of my kids to follow in my footsteps, but I figure with 6 of them, there's got to be at least 1 or 2 that are
Well,
interested, right?
I got 5 and I didn't even get the 1/5. Come on.
You know what though? They're
Take
still
it.
young. And
Yeah.
when I was in my mid-20s, I still wasn't sure. My degree in biochemistry, I still was thinking, I went to school to go into medicine. So
Yeah.
it wasn't until my mid-20s I started thinking about this career. So give them
Yeah.
time, give them time,
Well,
Dwight.
the youngest is 24 and the oldest is going to be 37. So let's see. I hope, they've showed interest. My son showed interest in the past and I sat down, but it's a confidence issue, which comes with age too. Even at 24, they're still figuring out life, right? So, but awesome start to the conversation. Those listeners that are going, come on, get back on topic. Well, that was a topic, a great topic to discuss. But so we last talked about budget, and you had mentioned it, and I've mentioned as well many times. The listeners have heard me talk about it. Budget's not a dirty word. But today in society, I remember growing up and hearing, even in school, they talk about budgeting. What? No, my parents see budgeting's terrible, that you live a terrible life and you're living under a microscope. And it's not about living under a microscope. It's about living a life of intention, about having a purposeful life and knowing that you have money to pay your bills, that you are saving for a future, that you can have it all, and it's in black and white. So, you look at the fact of there's certain steps in life to be successful. And if you go to bake a cake, you follow a recipe because it's going to give you a better shot at success to make sure that that cake is what you want. And it's no different in life. People that are listening, a budget helps you keep your life in line. It keeps you on a financial and life roadmap that's going to give you more shot and more chances of success. And it's made a huge difference in my life. It's made a huge difference in my clients' lives. And I want us to share some stories. And we're going to start off with you. You talked about the fact that you wouldn't have a business without a budget, and that you had a story you wanted to share about groceries. So the stage is yours, my friend. Please do.
Well, to your point, I mean, budgets, a lot of people think budgets are restrictive, and I think they offer freedom, because budgets don't let you do everything, but they allow you to focus your resources, your energy into what's most important. I mean, we're talking about family and things like that and experiences. It helps you, it forces you to get more clear about what's really meaningful to you. So you're not chasing what is meaningful to somebody else or what you think impresses somebody else. So a budget just makes you more intentional. And the reason that budgets are just in my life, I've seen it be a complete game changer. So I started my business, I think we might talk about this a little bit the other day, 2007, financial planning practice with a biochemistry degree, my daughter on the way, at the very beginning of the worst financial crash since the Great Depression. It was terrible timing. And I did not have the credentials. I had no formal experience. Nobody was trusting anybody in the financial industry, especially not some new kid. And it was a really slow process building up the business. I had some wins in there, but I went through a transition a few years in, changing how my business was going to be set up. And I knew it was going to be better in the long run, but it was going to mean some real difficulties in the short term. So back in 2011, my business grossed about $25,000, or not gross, netted $25,000 of income. My housing expenses, just my taxes, insurance, utilities, and mortgage, was about $2,000 a month. So that pretty much wiped out all my income. And I remember just feeling less than, in the sense of a business person. Like, what am I doing? I can't pay my basic bills. I felt less than in the sense of a father and as a husband. I can't provide for my family. And I just remember being so distraught over that and starting to feel kind of hopeless. Like, maybe I should give up on this thing. This business is not worth it. It's the cost is just too high. And this was in February. Or actually, I'm not sure if it was early in the year, but it was winter. It was dark, it was cold. And that's kind of how my life was feeling at that time, just dark and cold and alone. And we had 2 kids at that point. We had 1 kid on the way, and I was completely overwhelmed. And we're coming home from something, I don't remember where. And I pull up into the driveway, and Dwight, there was a box of groceries on our front step. To this day, I don't know who left them. And it might have been $100 worth of groceries. And at that point in my life, it didn't matter if it was $100 worth of groceries or a suitcase with $1 million. It was that little glimpse of hope that reminded me, Chad, you're going to be taken care of. Like, God is not going to let your family starve. Yes, it's going to be hard, but there's people out there that are watching out for you. It's kind of going back to our conversation about friendships. There are lions in your life that are going to protect you, that God is going to use to make sure that you're taken care of. Just keep pushing forward. And I'm not saying everything got easy after that, but it was that glimpse of hope, that box of groceries sitting on our front steps. I'll never forget that. And the reason I bring this all up in the sense of budgeting is the only reason, other than God's grace and mercy, the only reason we were able to survive that is we had trimmed our expenses down to the bare minimum. And we had, coming into this moment in time, had no debt. And we did accumulate some during this time, but we had a clean slate. We didn't have credit cards. We didn't have car payments. Dwight, if I was coming into that without a budget and with a lot of debt, I would have had to turn my back on this business. I would have probably ended up going back the medicine route. No, I'm not saying my life would have been a disaster, but it wouldn't be what it is today. I wouldn't have this business. I wouldn't be making the money that I'm making right now. But it gave me the opportunity to get through a valley in my life so I could keep climbing that mountain. Without a budget, without eradicating the debt in our life, I don't see this happening. I don't think I'm sitting here talking to you. I think my life looks completely different.
Well, yeah, that's great share though, because so many people that are listening could be in that valley of despair that I call it, or living that life where they go to bed at night and get up in the morning in quiet desperation, live their day like that. And the budget itself, I know for myself, especially in 2008, during the financial crisis, right before it got at its absolute worst in the fall of 2008 is when I got full-time custody of my kids, went from joint to full-time custody. And so all of a sudden now, commission-based business, I decided when I started my business not to do the fee-based, that I would keep it. I found that it was more for myself. It kept me more real and not being that person I had to put more effort into earning the business. But what happened to my business? Well, the crash of the markets affected Canada just as well as did the US and around the world. All of a sudden, I went from a person making 6 figures to making next to nothing. And no work out there for me, right? Nobody wanted to talk to anybody about anything, even life insurance. They didn't want to talk about even the basics of doing that because people, you'd think they'd want help, but they actually shrunk into that cocoon. So
yes,
I relied on a budget heavily just to try to get by. And all of a sudden I'd been at a point where wasn't writing debt, right? Didn't have, I wasn't doing amazing in the sense of saving. I was like a lot of people, just, oh, I got money, I'm spending it. I knew what my budget was, but I wasn't living what I was teaching. Chad, I've been teaching and learned all this stuff in the first years of getting into business back in 2002, and was a proponent of it. And I'd stand on a soapbox and talk about it, but I had forgotten how to do it myself. Well, that was a giant wake up call that I needed to reassess my budget, take it serious, because a budget for me gives me the ability to continually have hope, like that I'm going to make it. Yeah, I can see it's going to be tough this month, but that's okay. Next month's going to be a little bit better. Or even if every single month's going to be tough, at least I know that this is the train I'm going to be on temporarily. Now, what can I do that I have all these numbers in place that I know exactly that unfortunately I've only got $1, but I need $1.20. And it's going to be like that for a little period of time because my business isn't doing as well, but it still it grounded me. It was like a life raft, really. I don't know if I've ever thought of that way, but I just thought about it. It's like having a life preserver on. It gave me the ability to keep my head above water, even though I still didn't have quite enough. It was still enough for me mentally to stay above water, to not, fall behind and feel terrible about my life. And I rode through it right into, because like you said, it was 2007, then 2011. I remember my first year starting in this business. I started in 2002. What was going on in 2002? We were still in the .com bubble, right? Mm-hmm. I started it. So you and I have a lot of commonality. I just different circumstances of when we started in the markets. And it was a struggle. My first year, I only made $8,000. Right? It was like $8,000 in commissions. I'm raising kids, even in a joint custody situation. I still had support payments. I still had different things I had to pay for. And my expenses were way more than $8,000. So, budgeting, when I was introduced to it, saved my life back then too. So every time I look at my life, budgeting has saved me. Even clients that I've helped that have been in debt, never been on holidays before, never thought that they could actually do and accomplish anything in life. Budgeting made a huge difference in their life. It still does. They still talk about it. Sadly, I have more clients that start on the train, but jump off way too soon. And then they wonder why their lives, when we do, sometimes, I don't know if you have this challenge. Sometimes I have clients that it's impossible to do reviews with them. They've always got excuses. And then when you finally see them, maybe it's been a couple of years since they've seen me and they haven't been consistent with me and their lives. And we start going over their net worth and their budget. We review everything and find out that they're behind the 8 ball again. The budget would have been their life raft. It would have been their preserver.
Well, and I just want to encourage people that are listening to, budgets are difficult, the most difficult in the first 2 or 3 months. It's like getting on a new diet or a workout program. It is a little bit uncomfortable at the outset, but then you start feeling better and then you never want to do life without it. And to your point about that idea of the life raft, I think psychologically it's a little bit of a life raft too, because your life can be spiraling out of control. I think all of us have times where we feel like that, but a budget gives you a sense of agency. I am telling this money where to go, and instead of wondering where it went, and it allows you to feel like I'm acting on a plan. I'm pushing forward on this path. This path might have a lot of obstacles, might be very difficult, might be all uphill right now, but I have a path in front of me. And I think it keeps people from wandering aimlessly. So just encourage folks. I mean, that first 2-3 months, you're figuring a lot of stuff out. You're having to change a lot of habits. It's okay to be frustrated. You just got to keep on going. And Dwight and I, we practice what we preach. I'm sure a lot of these folks are familiar with Dave Ramsey. I was blessed in a household where we were following Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was. There was a predecessor to Dave Ramsey. His name was Larry Burkett, and he had a class called Crown Financial. and it was a biblically based financial class on stewardship, but a lot of it was on debt and budgeting. And I'm grateful I grew up in a household where that stuff was in our face all the time. Now, when you're 8 years old, your dad puts you on a budget, you think it's child abuse. When you're 42 and you look back, you're like, wow, that was amazing that I learned these lessons before junior high. And these lessons, a lot of folks don't necessarily get to learn. But the other part of this, Dwight, is this isn't a one-off. This isn't like, hey, it worked for me, it worked for Dwight, we're the lucky few. I've seen budgeting change lives my entire life. I grew up watching it happen, watching people's lives transform because they took control of this one area of their life, their financial life. And then it's amazing how that intentionality spread to relationships. It spread to physical health. And just one more metaphor, a budget is like a checkup of your spending habits. So just the other day, I had to get some blood work done. I have a blood clotting condition. So every so often I have to go get blood work. And we're just checking everything. We're watching the numbers, right? And we want to do that with our health. We don't want to wait until something is a medical emergency before it's addressed. Same thing with a budget. It forces you to look at your numbers so you don't have a financial problem brewing, a financial cancer growing in your spending habits that you're not aware of until it becomes an emergency. So you're able to catch things, you're able to catch habits while they're relatively slow. So it doesn't just fix maybe old behaviors, it's actually preventative maintenance, preventative medicine, so to speak. So you don't have financial issues, or you're at least mitigating the risk of those financial issues in the future.
Oh yeah, it gives a lot of confidence where people don't realize. It gives a lot of confidence that things can be, everybody looks at stuff in their financial lives. This is insurmountable. No, that's not true. Yes, it may be a few months of pain and suffering like you're talking about, but yeah, it's you explained it very well. There's not much I can add to that except that try it out. Anybody that's listening, reach out. I help people budget for free myself in my practice. Obviously, outside of Canada, I don't. If you're outside of Canada, I'd still be willing to help you. But in Canada, I help my clients budget because it's the first, it's just like playing anything. This is a life game. This is square one of life, and this is where you need to start. And maybe you weren't taught it like and been as blessed as Chad was, where you were, like you said, it was child abuse. But I like how you put that. That's how you would look at it. I remember how tight my dad was with life and didn't realize that he was running a budget. I had no clue that's why. And my dad, so successful as an entrepreneur, but it all started with the numbers, right? All crunching numbers, making sure everything was working just perfect. And this is what the household needed. I learned a lot of this in the future. That's my dad was doing this. So budgeting is very key to, again, intentional life, purposeful life, and reach out. Let's have a conversation. Reach out to Chad, whoever's listening. Even the worst that you can do is decide not to do it. The best you can do is find out, hey, I want to figure this out. And I work with people, even the most destitute of people, we figure it out, because in the long run, that relationship's built, they get their lives on track. And I have a lifelong friend and a client, right? It's always worked out, right? God blesses me with the people that are willing to be willing, right? To get help. So one of the things you mentioned, and this flows into what I wanted to go into this next conversation, you brought up about the fact of people going on a diet and it's painful for the first few months, just like doing a budget. So, even after 21 years, I'm surprised with what people's expectations are of the financial planning process and investing, right? They got their heads in the clouds because they've watched some movie or drama or whatever the case may be, had some friend that, put a bug in their ear that isn't the right information they should have. What have you found are their most common, we talked a little bit about this last time about the misconceptions in investing in financial planning, but how does that tie into your fitness and nutrition and the stuff that you believe in since you were very young. How does that all tie together?
Well, in a lot of ways. And let me just touch on a few. The number one, to what you just brought up about the time aspect. I mean, people don't give these things enough time. So, I used to train people, used to train athletes, and sometimes I would train just normal everyday folks. But I just remember people complaining. Usually was the people I was training, but like maybe other people at the gym, like, man, you gave me some diet advice, this and that, and I've been following it for a week and it just doesn't seem like it's changed much. I'm thinking, you've treated your body like crap for 20 years. You think a week was going to fix it all? Like, they just were so impatient. And I think a lot of that can happen with finances too. Just think of what's going on in the markets right now. So you have people that might have been investing for these last couple of years, and their accounts, if they've been investing for a long time, their accounts today might be worth less than they were at the beginning of 2022 because the markets have declined. And we can look at that and be like, I'm behind, this isn't working. Or we can look at this and say, for the last 20 months, I've been buying the best companies of the world on sale, and it's actually going to help, but it's uncomfortable in the moment. And I think when you are intentional about your health, you have to make those same decisions. It's eating foods that don't taste as good. Kale is never going to taste like potato chips, no matter what kind of lies they tell you on the bag. It's not the same. And
you're right, it isn't.
Cheesecake is always going to taste better than broccoli. I'm sorry, but you're doing something that's a little less comfortable now for a much greater benefit, but people have to be willing to do that in the moment. And it's okay to go through those periods of discomfort. The other thing I would say is it has to be sustainable. So don't make yourself so uncomfortable. This kind of goes back to the budgeting conversation. You have to give it 3 months, and find out what's sustainable. So if you're too intense with this process, you might quit after 2 weeks or after 2 months. It's not going to change your life if you're doing it for such a short period of time. So just like your health, your workout program has to be sustainable. If you haven't worked out in 20 years, don't try to work out like a professional athlete. Give yourself some grace, build up to it. Same thing with the budget. It's not about what's optimal and quote unquote perfect, which doesn't exist, by the way. You know that, Dwight. There's no perfect investment plan. There's no perfect budget.
There isn't.
What you can sustain over time is what's going to make the biggest impact. So good, executed relentlessly over time is much, much better than optimal that you can't sustain. So why that is so important too is the last parallel, and then I'll let you jump back in, Dwight, is you have to be able to commit to this lifelong, because I'm going to use a professional athlete as an example on both sides of this equation. So take like a professional football player who retires, they've made millions of dollars, but they never really learned the good financial habits, and they're broke after 3 to 5 years. So they never learned how to be a good steward of that money. They never learned how to use that tool, and they weren't able to sustain it. So even if you are not a professional athlete, but you build this wealth up over a long period of time, and you don't continue to use those good principles, you can lose it. I've talked to many multimillionaires or former multimillionaires who lost it all because they stopped being disciplined. They stopped doing all the things that got them to that point. And just going back to that professional athlete, I'm sure we've seen these guys on TV, they're commentators now, and you're looking at them, they're 60 pounds overweight. And you're just like, man, if I didn't remember you playing 20 years ago or 10 years ago, I would never believe that you're a professional athlete, because you've let everything go. And same thing, they stopped doing what got them to that point. So you can take somebody who's in incredible shape, they've worked out for 20 years, they spend a year eating garbage and not working out and drinking and staying up too late and all these other things. They can unravel 20 years of doing all the right things in maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years. So these financial habits have to be something people can commit to long term, because you can unravel 20 years of great financial habits with a year or two of being irresponsible. So again, that goes just back to the sustainability. It doesn't have to be optimal. It just has to be something that you guys can keep up and do consistently.
Yeah, and you're completely correct. And you're going to have those hiccup days. You're going to have those valley of despair days, even if you're running a budget or even if you're on a nutritional journey or a physical health journey. I see that myself, and it shocks me how many of these, it's not even just athletes. It happens to a lot of celebrities, right? It doesn't matter if it's with sports or if it's with entertainment, that they've never been taught the rules. It goes back to the simple rules of the money game, right? And giving money, they give money too much power over their lives, when really at the end of the day, money has no personality. It holds the personality of the person wielding it. And have respect for the fact when you do have money that you need to do something with it that's going to be sustainable long term. And they don't teach athletes that, because everybody's sitting there, or people in entertainment, and literally bowing down to them, and here, buy this car, here, buy this condo, invest in real estate, do this, do that. And they have nobody really, their coach. So they have a coach in their sports, but they don't have a coach in their finance. And that's what you and I are. We're mentors. We're people that are going to coach you to learn how to save 20%, 10%, whatever the numbers work out. And then you spend the rest, and that 10, 20% long-term, depending on what it's invested in, right? Your hope is that it's going to give you sustainability for when you're not an athlete anymore. And let's be real, a lot of these people that are sitting behind the desks and they're an analyst, it's because they have no choice. They need the money. Like you said, though, they've blown it all, right? They've spent all their wealth. And I have clients like that aren't even athletes, that were wealthy. And now they're driving beat down, broke down cars. They're renting things. They don't own anything anymore because they just were out having a heyday, and everybody else behind the scenes is going, oh, look what that person's accomplished. Well, you don't open up the book of their life and look inside, you'll see that they're living a facade. They're not the happiest. And then all of a sudden look at the end result. And then they're going, yeah, wonder what shady things they did. Look where he's at, or look where she's at. I've heard it all in my life.
Well, and again, this goes back to what you were saying. Money is just a tool. And if you don't know how to use it, having a bigger tool isn't going to help you. And it's, you think about an athlete or a celebrity or whoever, we're picking on them, but I think that's maybe a more extreme example, but it just goes to show that if you don't know how to handle the money you have, getting more of it is not going to make your situation better. And I think a lot of people think, well, I can build wealth when I'm making more money. The habits, again, like we talked about the other day, the habits have to start today. Start small, because if you don't start the habits when you're making what you think is insignificant amount of money, even if you do start making good money, you're still going to have poor financial habits. Just to use another metaphor, if you don't know how to drive well, giving somebody a Ferrari is not going to fix the problem. It just means they're going to crash at a much higher speed. And money can be that very same way. If we take somebody who is a bad driver, a faster car, it's like somebody who's a poor steward with money, more money, they just crash harder. It's a bigger scene, it's bigger explosions, but more money does not solve poor financial management. It magnifies it. It just makes it worse. So for folks listening, even if you feel like your cash flow is minimal, get on top of it now. Start creating those habits, because those are the habits that will give you the strength to wield that tool as it grows.
Yeah, it is a definite confidence booster. I was budgeting with a teacher this week, and she had never worked on it. We started on it last week. We talked a little bit more about it on a call this week again. And you can see just from one meeting to the next, her confidence level, just going through everything and understanding what her age is and how far she is from retirement. And now that she's getting a better grasp of her numbers, she knows what, as you talked about, you trim the fat when you were living a budget and struggling to make your family be able to survive. You knew exactly, but she never did. Now she does. And to see the gladness and hear it in her tone that she's appreciative of the fact that she's going to have charge of her life, because I'm just the start of it. It's up to her, right? Long term, in order for her to succeed. So,
Right.
Chad, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Do not underestimate the power of small beginnings. So that's kind of what I just kind of mentioned about those small habits. Great habits start small. And if folks feel like their back is against the wall, they feel like they can't do much. I mean, again, we talked about the agency that you feel in the budget. It's so easy to overlook what we can control because we're so focused on what we can't control. So focus on that first part. What can you control? No, you might not be able to influence how much you get paid directly or what the economy is going to do or all these different things, but focus on the elements of your life that you can control, that you do have influence over, and execute those with excellence, even if it's small. So there's a Greek proverb, the Socrates principle, and it's kind of this idea that can one coin make you wealthy? So at what point, if I gave you one coin, Dwight, does that make you wealthy? No. Well, if I give you two, no. But if you have an entire truckload of silver coins or gold coins, you will have wealth. But at what point does that happen? And the idea of this parable, and I'm just kind of giving the Cliff Notes version, is that it's an aggregate. It's all of those little things adding up. And I think with our habits, with the trajectory of our life, it's an aggregate of all those little tiny things that are so easy to ignore because we think, oh, it doesn't really matter if I save money on this thing. It doesn't really matter if I do a few push-ups. It doesn't really matter if it does. It absolutely matters. Do the little things consistently because that's the thing that will give you success over time. The people who do well in life aren't doing things that nobody else is doing. They're just doing consistently what most people do occasionally. So don't overlook the little things.
What a great closing message. I so appreciate you. So our time is almost up and I want to respect our listeners and your time. However, before we end, can you please tell the listeners what's the best way to reach you?
Well, we've been talking a lot about budget. So I want to give the listeners a couple things. So our website is veritasalaska.com, but you can find us on Instagram and on LinkedIn. Most of my presence right now is actually on LinkedIn, but I want to give another email address. It's Logan@veritasalaska.com. So Logan is our budget counselor. He's a Dave Ramsey preferred financial coach, and Logan@veritasalaska.com, and mention to him that you heard about him on this show. I'm going to tell him to give you a free budget consultation. So I'll cover the costs. Don't worry about it for your listeners, Dwight, because we talked so much about budgeting today, and just want to give those folks that opportunity that they're here in America, that you might not be able to help there in Canada. So we want to join you in this effort, Dwight.
Oh, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. I'll make sure for people that are new to the show, go to giveaheck.com. Go into the podcast portal. It's a big button. You can't miss it. You will see a picture of Chad. And below that, I will make sure that everything that he's mentioned about his website, the email address for Logan, and just reach out. You never have to be alone, right? You just reach out. Yes, it might be uncomfortable, but really at the end of the day, is the pain of where you're stuck going to be, is that pain greater than the pain you're going to feel? Most likely it is. By reaching out to Chad or myself, it's a very simple conversation. We're both laid back. Reaching out to Logan, I imagine he wouldn't be part of your business if he wasn't similar to you in nature of how he deals with people. So don't sit, don't wait, just take care of it. Do it right now. Pull out your phone, email from your laptop, your tablet. Do something for your family and for yourself that will change your trajectory forever. So any last words, Chad, before we wrap this up?
Yeah, just one last thing. You talked about how so many people struggle to stay on a budget. And I just want to remind you, piggyback on what you just said, Dwight. Guys, you don't have to do this alone. And especially for folks that are listening over there in Canada that can then pick up the phone or get on your computer and get in touch with Dwight. Pull him into your corner. Finances are a team sport. Don't do this alone. Accountability, that's what helps people stay consistent. And if nothing else, you might know how to do a budget, you might know all the things, but having Dwight in your corner for accountability, just to push you, nudge you, and encourage you when you need it, that's going to be worth all of it. So don't do this alone, guys. You don't have to.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Chad. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.